Hi, this is Sarah Ellis, and this is the Squiggly Careers podcast. This is a special edition of the podcast where you'll hear my conversation with rower, diplomat, and just all-round brilliant person, Cath Bishop. She has written a book called The Long Win, and we had a conversation about it back in 2020 now. I've lost all concept of time, which I really enjoyed, where she shared some of her research and her ideas about really how we frame learning and our own definitions of success. And the episode came out at the start of 2021 in January, and it was short and specific and really insightful for people. But we have had some feedback that people would have liked to have heard more of the conversation. Unfortunately, we have a longer version. So we thought for the people who are particularly interested, we will make this available not on all of our podcast platforms, but just to some of our clients and friends who've particularly requested it. So I hope you enjoy this slightly extended edition, and I'll be back at the end just to say goodbye. So Cath, thank you so much for joining us today on the Squiggly Careers podcast.
Brilliant to be here.
And I'm going to dive straight into this idea of the long win and what we mean by kind of thinking about winning in a different way. So I suppose, was there a moment that really prompted you to think, we have got to redefine how we think about winning and success? Was it a light bulb moment where you suddenly went, this just doesn't feel right? Or was it more over the course of months and years that you kind of got to this realisation?
It was definitely the latter. It was an incremental process of nagging doubts and just seeing stories around me and thinking, well, that doesn't fit the narrative because they've just won and they're not very happy. Or I've come second at the Olympics and people have always told me that that makes me, the first loser. So, how should I feel about that? And all of these sort of reflections about how does this make sense? And, again, when I lost races, this sort of, again, some of the culture around me was encouraging me to be kind of incredibly miserable and winners don't like losing and all of this. But kind of thinking, I don't think that's actually helping me to get better. So it was a series of different experiences that I struggled to really make sense of. And I knew there was something didn't quite add up here, that it wasn't helping us to perform in a sports world. And the same thinking doesn't help us in schools, doesn't help us in businesses. It's been absolutely stories and stories, giving me more confidence to challenge the myth of what winning means.
You don't discount winning completely. You've still called it the long win. And so I was interested to kind of know from you, when you're thinking now about what it means to win, how would you encourage us all to kind of think about winning? But as a really competitive person, I was thinking, how do I start to think about winning in a different way or in a new way?
Yeah, it's really important. I'm absolutely not against the pursuit of excellence, but I am against a very narrow sense of measuring being about a moment in time and being particularly just you're the best, if you like. So people around you are a threat to their rivals that you don't like and would never work with and don't respect. All of that kind of I see it as old-fashioned, but it still exists a lot in the working world and the sporting world and the educational world. And so it is about thinking of a broader set of success criteria than one moment in time, because that one moment in time is also completely out of your control. For example, this year, the Olympic athletes have got no Olympics to go to. So if that's the only thing that matters, then it's really hard to pick yourself up when that's wiped away. And you have no control about whether that Olympics happens or not. So it's about setting broader success criteria, not pinning it on one moment in time beyond your control, making sure that there are also the way you go about things is really important, because how you turn up, how you train in a sporting world, how you go to work, how you react and interact with your colleagues is really important for what happens next after any goal or sales figure that you hit or whatever it might be. And it's that kind of ongoing piece that you want to be investing in. I think one of the things that I remember kind of loving learning about when I was looking at the language and how language has been distorted over time is that the original meaning of competition comes from competere, and that means striving together. And somehow we've started to interpret competition to be striving against. And as soon as you get into a striving against others, they're my enemies, I want them to do badly, I look better if they do badly, we're not in a good place for ourselves or for people around us. So that concept of being competitive but with others, collaboratively, that you are using each other to support each other, challenge each other and move on, that's a much more healthy way of being competitive.
Yeah, and it feels much less binary. You know, if I win, you lose, or vice versa. And that point about control is interesting because I think one of the points that you discuss in the book is the difference between performance and results. And I wonder perhaps you could just explain that a little bit further for us, and whether do we have more control over our performance was kind of my follow-up question to that.
Absolutely. So this is a big shift that took place in sports psychology about 20 years ago, really, where they discovered that if an athlete focuses on the results, they actually don't perform as well. You don't get the best results. So they separate out concepts of performance and results. Often these are intertwined in the business world, but in sport we separate them out because we cannot control the results. They will depend on external factors. How fast the rest of the world go, perhaps a referee or an umpire, actually whether you're fit and well and not injured and able to compete, or in a year like this, you know, whether there's a health pandemic that enables the competition to happen. So we really can't control that. But what we can control is our performance and developing that to the best of our ability. So it's not defined by what someone else is doing. It's not just beating that person over there. Actually, it's about exploring what's possible. So you're being more ambitious, arguably, than just trying to beat that person over there. You're exploring what's possible and you're thinking about all of the factors that you can improve for your performance. So it means you invest on a daily basis in some longer term aspects as well. Because if I'm going to reach my peak performance at an Olympics in 2, 3, 4 years, then I need at that point not just to be fit and strong and be able to kind of have the best technique. I also need to be able to communicate at a peak level with the crewmates around me. I need to be able to manage the pressure. I need to be able to bring the best mindset to enable me to deal with whatever happens during the race, make good decisions, think positively, help myself to correct any, slips along the way, and be also thinking about what else can I do to get the best out of myself. And if I'm not developing that mindset every day, then I won't reach that peak point. Now, in the short term, I can get away with not doing all of those things, and I'll probably still do okay in my next race next month. But there's no way I can actually become the best athlete I can become in the future if I'm not investing in a daily basis on some of these broader aspects of performance like communication, collaboration, really authentic relationships with those around you where you're challenging, supporting each other, as well as recovery, nutrition, looking after yourself. So it enables you to broaden what comes into performance rather than simply what's measured this week or next week, thinking about what are all the things that I need to develop. And that, of course, then enables you to excel and in a more sustainable way for a longer period of time.
I suspect a lot of people will be listening to this episode at the start of 2021 as we're looking to what I think most of us hope will be a different year ahead to what 2020 felt like. And it's naturally a time where we talk about setting goals, we think about what's most important to us. I do think there is probably a bit of a move away from just thinking about New Year's resolutions, because I think we all now know no one ever sticks to them anyway. It has to be something kind of more fundamental about kind of who we are and kind of what really matters to us. And I'm interested just to know from kind of your experience, and then if you started to kind of research for the book, when people have this kind of mindset of more of a long win, how does that impact goal setting? Does that mean that you do set goals, but you set goals more linked to performance? Does it mean you don't set goals? I suppose what should be your experience, but what also have you kind of observed from the research you've done?
So it definitely is about goal setting being an ongoing process. So it's not one moment in time that it has to happen in January and you only do it once a year. It's absolutely not. It actually is about making sure all the time you're reviewing, actually, are these goals making sense to me anymore? And do I need to review them? And is there somewhere else I need to go? Because the danger is we can sort of be chasing goals that actually don't mean anything to us anymore. And then we realise that too late and we've invested lots of energy. So goals are a good tool. They're helpful. But in themselves, they shouldn't be the full deal either. It's about thinking, what are the things that really matter to us? And searching for, where we want to make a difference, the purpose, if you like, the things that give meaning to daily life. And those also our internal drivers, the things that are important to us, the stuff we enjoy, the stuff that each day gives us a bit of a high. So it's balancing, if you like, some of those internal drivers and then how can I best use those in order to make a difference to the world around me? These are the things that give meaning to our life. So they need to be part of how we plan our lives. Now, whether they fit into goals or whether you have a different way, if you like, of organising your life, that doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a goal, but a goal can be a useful tool for helping you along the way, giving you some milestones, some sense of, am I making progress? But it's also really important that those goals aren't just about kind of external factors. So have I won a medal? Or have I got my bonus? Or did I get my sales target that was hit? They need to be actually, it's much more useful if they're goals that relate to our values. You know, how have I shown up? Have I supported people around me? Have I really helped others to be their best? Have I been compassionate to people around me? And what am I doing that's making a difference? And how might I make that maybe in a different way? So again, questions need to be part of this. The danger of goals is they sort of lock things down. Whereas actually, for a long win thinking, a long win approach, we need to keep those questions going. You know, I really want to make a difference in this area. These are some of the things I'm going to do. And then actually I'm going to try and see what else might I be able to do and who else can I learn from in this area. And then I'm going to see, you know, after a few months, 3 months, 6 months, what's working here and how might I do this differently. So it's really important that we keep the questions as part of that. And almost have that kind of guiding question about how can I best make a difference in an area that I care about, whether it's something in my local community, something involving my family, my business, or a bigger issue, the environment, whatever it might be, that these things bring a kind of sense of, yep, it's worthwhile doing some really dull, mundane stuff today because it's part of something that matters. We need to be able to find that.
And I'm interested, you referenced in the book someone we've had on the podcast previously, Roman Krznaric, the philosopher, and he also kind of has put some work into the world around the importance of thinking in more of a long-term way. And he actually has this lovely phrase about accessing our acorn brains, which I think is really evocative of what it is that we're trying to encourage people to do, to kind of think beyond next week and kind of next month and have that broader perspective. But realistically, I think what gets in the way for people when we kind of talk to people about careers and maybe thinking about goals is just headspace. So people are incredibly busy, people are feeling quite overwhelmed. You know, we hear that quite frequently. And so even, you know, when we're doing any sessions actually with people on career development, the thing that often is the biggest barrier is just the capacity or kind of prioritising, almost thinking beyond tomorrow or next week. People kind of find that hard, and perhaps it has been something we've not practiced very much. So I was kind of thinking about, if you are someone who naturally, you know, you're very day to day, you feel like you've got a lot on, you know, most people have got lots of things in their life that they're kind of trying to do all at the same time. How could people start to practice this idea of kind of more long-term thinking, this idea of kind of long win? What sort of things could our listeners just have a go at?
Yeah, so just in terms of time, I think I want to stretch in both directions. So not only do I want to stretch longer term, definitely, because that just gives us perspective that actually makes the busyness then, it's not so important, some of this stuff, and maybe I can drop some of these things, or I've just got to get them done. But actually there's some other things that are more important. So perspective is a really helpful factor for the longer term. But I also want to make success more of a daily thing. So it's not about achieving an outcome. Actually today, what are the things that are going to energize me and make today worthwhile? I'm probably not going to hit any targets. I'm not going to win any medals if I'm an athlete. I'm not going to hit my sort of quarterly results in business. But what is it today that's going to make it worthwhile? I've got all this busy stuff, but what are the things at the end of the day that's going to make today feel successful? And often that's around things that are in our control, around our mindset. So how I tackled a challenge or some difficulty that came up, the way we behave, again, how am I showing up for myself and for the people around me? What's the impact that has on how I bring myself to that busy day? And then the relationships, the interactions, how in those conversations can I actually make sure I'm connecting at a bit of a deeper level, supporting, caring about people around me? Those are the things at the end of the day that we can look back on and not just think, have I done everything on my to-do list? We've probably never done that. That's not a great guide to success. Actually, who have I helped today? And what were the things that really energized me today? And how can I maybe make sure there's lots of those going forward as well? So again, we're reviewing. Reviewing is a brilliant tool that I always use to support leaders, to support any of us really, to get sense out of what matters. And again, it's just simple questions. What are the things that I've done today that have helped other people, that have given me some energy, that have also challenged me? So reviewing just some of those questions and making sure it's not actually just the to-do list. As soon as we're focused on tasks, then that becomes more draining and it loses its meaning. They're just a set of tasks. Actually, it's the people involved in those tasks that you're connecting with, supporting, challenging. And if you can connect with those connections are what often give the meaning to the work we do. So focus on the people first. Who are the people you need to connect with today? What can you do to deepen that? And maybe you can actually connect in a different way that will give it more meaning. So again, let's reverse thinking of the things around our mindset, our behaviours and our relationships that we have a lot of choice over. There are things we don't, and when we think about those, it gets out of control, and the overwhelm comes from focusing on things we can't control. So actually, let's look at how we bring ourselves to what we're doing. So for me, it's stretching success both into today, but not defined in tasks or purely outcomes, and actually in that longer term, to actually have some perspective on what are the things that really matter. Because we can be really busy all week and do a hell of a lot of things that no one's going to remember in a year's time. What are the things that actually are going to help me towards some of those areas that I might have thought of in January or whenever I'm reviewing what matters? Which are the things in the diary that shift the dial in that direction? How can I make sure I prioritise those? And so these questions, these looking for meaning in what we're doing, is a really helpful way of constantly asking this. This is about reflection time. It's a few minutes. It's, as we walk to our desk, it's perhaps whilst we're having some lunch. So keeping those questions, stopping us getting stuck with, I'm in a rut, I've got something else to do, and I'm not really thinking about the human side behind it.
Yeah, and I think what's so lovely about that is one of the things that we're really interested in is how can we make learning by doing an everyday thing? And so people talk a lot of like, oh, that's how you learn the most. You learn the most by kind of what you're doing day in, day out. But I don't think that just happens. I don't think that just happens by turning up. I think it happens because you are choosing to have that awareness, and that awareness has then got to prompt action. More of the same, less of the same, kind of doing something differently. And those kind of what we would call coach yourself questions. Who have I helped? What's given me energy? What have I learned today? Those really small ones. And even if you ask just kind of one at the end of the day, just feels like you would, as you say, be approaching the work that you do with a really positive mindset, and also make sure that you are making progress towards those longer term things that are really important. And I think you're spot on with the reason sometimes the long term stuff also just really helps us. It's just when we need that perspective where it all gets a bit much, or we are thinking, why am I doing this thing for the 4 millionth time? And it just gives us that confidence. Oh, that's why I'm doing it. It's okay. I'll get through the next hour, or I'll get through this afternoon, but ultimately it'll be worth it.
That learning approach, can I just jump in there, is so key because it creates brilliant momentum for us. So again, we can often feel stuck, overwhelmed. We're in that position where, oh, help. Learning gives us that momentum because we're always looking to shift something, learn something, ask someone a different question. It gives us momentum moving forward, and that makes us feel more resilient, if you like. It's when we're stuck in a certain place that we then, oh gosh, how do I get out of here? And again, you're right, proactively learning is the important thing, because actually a lot of the time we're going through the motions, we're on automatic pilot, and then again, that doesn't feel very energizing. We're drained, we're not actually doing something that matters. So connecting with, how come I do this differently? Or how would somebody else do this? Gives us that energy and momentum that keeps us moving forward when we're hugely challenged by the situation we're in at the moment, the challenges we have at work, the choices we have in front of us. Let's just keep learning and not looking for a single answer. That's really important. We're not looking for, yep, I know this one, I've done it. We're looking to constantly learn, review, see it through a different lens, go again, try something else. So this is really an ongoing, this constant learning mindset that I talk about that's so valuable. And progress is important, not necessarily just jumping to outcomes all the time.
What is it that you think is most commonly like either getting in the way or hindering, whether it's people or organisations? What is that one kind of thing that you just keep coming back to and go, if we could just stop doing this or fix this?
So I hear this empty language a lot of, we want to be number one, or we want to win. And then I say, okay, well, why do you want to win? What is it exactly that you're going to win by being number one? What does that mean? And what are you going to do with the responsibility that comes with being number one? How will you change your sector, your world, your industry, your company when you are number one? How will you make customers' lives better or change the environment for the better or communities? And there's nothing there. It's very empty. So whenever I hear that narrative, if you like, that empty language about winning that has no meaning behind it, then I feel very frustrated because I know actually success won't come. People won't be engaged. Staff aren't able to connect and give their best if they don't know why something matters. And yet there's a sense that, oh yeah, that's okay. If we just say we want to win and we want to be number one, that's what it's all about. Well, the long win is really trying to pull all of that back and say that's actually a nonsense. We need to create meaning. We need to understand why our teams exist, why our companies exist. And that has to have relevance to people on a daily basis. Otherwise, we don't bring our best. We won't be motivated to deal with challenges, to adapt when all sorts of curveballs get thrown at us, as we've had in 2020. And, we just won't have that opportunity to learn and grow together. So that empty rhetoric that's so narrow, but still so prevalent, is really frustrating.
Back to where we've started our conversation today, you talked about comparison, what you kind of see around you. And then, it's a really easy trap to fall into because you still see that behaviour. And then I think, and Helen is better at this than I am, but you see other people going, well, we're number one, or we've done this. And I think, oh, well, maybe that's what I should be doing. Maybe that's kind of the right, in inverted commas, answer. And I think that's kind of the other thing that it's made me kind of appreciate just listening to you, is how important it is that you don't compare yourself to the wrong people or the wrong places, because again, that it's so easy to then be swayed by, like you say, stuff that is a bit of a sham.
Yeah, you're right. You fall into the trap of rankings and metrics, and we live in a world surrounded by rankings and metrics, many of which are meaningless. They are almost created to justify themselves. And when you don't get the metrics you want, then you get a new measure that will tell you what you want. So we have to be really careful, because as a society, we're a little bit addicted to these, and they are used and abused around us in daily life. And they're part of that political game that is not actually changing anything, but it looks as if we're changing something because we've measured something. And whenever I see a metric or a ranking, I also think, what isn't being measured in this ranking? Because nearly always there's something really important and valuable that isn't easily fitted into a box or a spreadsheet that we don't want to lose sight of, because that's actually key to being successful in a sustainable way. And this comes back to many cultural aspects of the way we're doing things that often in an organisation are a little bit less easy to measure. But just because something is less easy to measure, it doesn't make it less important. In fact, I'm starting to realise often these things are the most important factors, because they relate to the culture, the reputation of a company, the way we do things, whether we're innovative and able to explore, whether it's psychologically safe. And all of these aspects actually determine how well we do our jobs, how motivated we are, how easy it is to attract really good talent and retain talent, and adapt to all the uncertainty that we face in the world at the moment. These are absolutely critical to long-term sustainability. Just because they're difficult to measure, there's a danger we're not developing them. And if we're not developing them, we ain't going to be number one, that's for sure.
And actually, I think that also works at an individual level, because I was then also thinking, if we're thinking about how we're measuring our own success in our career, in our lives generally, we often default to those things that are most visible. As you were talking there, I was starting to think for myself, what am I maybe not measuring, or is perhaps just less obvious, that's actually really important to me about my progression, my learning. Back to your question around, am I living my values? So that's something that it's not as binary. It's, am I living my values is not usually a yes or no. It's there are shades of grey, but actually being able to ask yourself those questions and kind of work out, well, what would that look like? And what more could I do? Or actually, I feel like I'm in a really good place with those. That I think could be when people are setting their goals, if that's what people are doing, maybe think about, well, what are the goals that maybe are harder to measure? Or I might have to figure out a little bit, what would success look like? And they actually might be really interesting things to kind of, at least, I think, try out and experiment. I think with all of this stuff, that's the best way to get started, is just to go, let's have a go with what a different approach might look like. Let's try asking myself every day for a week, who have I helped today? And let's just see, is that useful? Is that helpful for me?
Yeah, I think we're taking your squiggly approach. I want to apply that to the goals. There's often we think we're setting goals, we've got to have like a really clean sheet of paper with goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, and maybe we've got some sort of things along the way. Well, actually, I want to make that a much more squiggly piece of paper. Doesn't even have to be one piece of paper. It can be a pattern, more of a, some of the mind mapping that you might do, with some doodles on it, with some pictures on it as well, with some values and some outcomes and some ideas of something you want to try, but you don't know how you're going to try it yet. I want to make it much more of a collage, if you like. So actually, we have kind of squiggly goal setting. As you were describing it there, that's what I was starting to see in my mind. So
I love that. And actually, I think in the book, you've actually got some brilliant questions. That was actually it sort of perhaps wasn't what I was expecting when I was kind of reading it through, but actually I think there's just really helpful questions kind of peppered throughout the book. And the one that I picked out as my favourite, and the one that often I use as part of workshops, particularly when you're in that mode of thinking we want people to feel positive and kind of upbeat and optimistic. And it's a question I use a lot as well, is when did you last try something for the first time? And I just think this idea of it prompts beginner's mindset. It encourages us to think about actually, we all do need to be adaptable. That is kind of a fact of how we're all working now. And actually, I had an experience this year where I joined a 6-week drawing course. And I was by far, I always think I'm a pretty accurate read of kind of my own capability, the worst on this course. I mean, these people were so good. Almost to the point where I nearly thought maybe this is not the right thing for me. But actually, it was just about getting comfortable, starting from scratch, knowing that it wasn't about comparing myself to others. It was about learning from others. And actually, they were so supportive as a group. And actually, I did it in probably the busiest time of the year. So it would have been really easy not to do it. It was a bit of a stressful time. We were taking toddlers for COVID tests and all sorts. So, and you just think it would have been so much easier not to do it. And yet when I reflect back on 2020, that moment of doing that thing for the first time, I think just stretched and challenged me in kind of all sorts of ways. So I think another great question for our listeners to ask themselves, but I thought I could ask you that question as well. So when was the last time you tried something, you kind of learned something or tried something for the first time?
Yeah, I love this question, and I sort of live by it a bit, really. I'm just always looking for something slightly different to do. So, I try and keep fit as much as I can. So I will often just skim through different Instagram accounts to look for some different exercises to do in the gym. Obviously, publishing the book has been a massively new thing to do. But actually, as part of that, virtually launching the book has meant that I have set up Eventbrite events that I had never done before. And that to me was actually quite challenging, even though in theory it's a straightforward thing to do, but I hadn't done it before. And that challenged me from a technological point of view. I think my kids are a great source of doing that, because I often think, oh no, I'm not very good at that. And I have to get over that and go, no, let's have a go. Let's have a try. I'm similarly not a great artist, but, again, I just want us to enjoy it. And I've found that I've actually been able to enjoy it just by playing around and being quite funny.
I think that word playful is actually quite important.
Yeah.
Just like giving yourself permission to play and to not feel like you have to be brilliant at everything all of the time. I actually saw something on Elizabeth Day's Instagram yesterday where she said she was actually talking about that. She was like, what do you do? Not because you want to be good at it or get better at it, just because you're playing, you just enjoy it. And I think her example was she likes singing in the car. I think sometimes people can feel this kind of pressure actually of continual improvement. But I do also think it's okay to just try stuff out and just to be experimenting. Instagram account recommendation, Kira London. It's hardcore. I suspect, Cath, as a previous Olympian, you'll be fine. But I am not fine when I do Kira London's workouts. It's really good. It's very like boot camp vibes. But she is someone who I also really admire her authenticity. She's got a real kind of point of view. I think she's very supportive of women just generally. And I think she's really running her own business. And so she's someone who, and you think, her point of references are so different to mine, as in I don't even understand the names of the music that she plays because I'm just not cool enough. She'll be like, oh, today we're listening to this playlist. And I'll think, I don't even know what that word means. But she is clearly having so much fun and everyone else is having so much fun.
Absolutely.
So there you go. There's my top tip for you.
Yeah, playing, interestingly, is a really great mindset to be in. It's a great place of learning. But often when we're playing, we're very present. We're very absorbed in what we're doing. And the place we're in, kind of in our minds when we're playing, is very close to being in the zone as an athlete, for example, or in any work that we're doing. When we're really absorbed in the moment and we're open to learning and trying as well, then it's a high performance space to be in. So it's really worth valuing that and thinking about actually, how do I create places in my life to be able to play? This isn't about just switching off and, yes, you're having fun. Of course you are. And it's because you're having fun and you're immersed in what you're doing that you perform better, therefore, at what you're doing as well. So it's hugely productive. So absolutely create space for that, not just as a trivial thing, but actually as part of developing, as part of working out how you can be at your best. It's hugely important.
And we kind of talked about what gets you frustrated and perhaps why that happens and where we might get to. Are there any, whether it's people or organisations or stories, that just really stick out to you from the kind of work that you've done and when you were considering kind of the approach you were going to share as part of the long win, that you just feel really epitomise this idea of the long win?
So there's one question that I found really powerful with some teams that I've worked with in companies in the last few months, also actually in the sports world, which is just to be asking, what are you gaining if you don't hit your targets? So i.e. your outcomes, if you like. So if you don't hit your profit margin or your sales figures, if you don't win your Olympic medal, what else are you gaining? And this is a question that actually unlocks then almost these different aspects of long win thinking, the broader success criteria, the constant learning process, and this connection with others. And I find just that one question has just brought some brilliant discussions. So quite a few companies asked me to talk to teams where morale is low because they're not going to hit the targets that were set in January 2020. And there's this sense that we failed. And how can we sort of remotivate ourselves? And it's because we've lost this sense of meaning, of other things that bring us meaning in our lives. And that to me is one of the questions that I just always find gets a great discussion going. What have we gained? Because then we start to think more broadly, and what else is on that journey, you know, the relationships, the lessons, the things we tried, the things we experimented because we knew what we were doing wasn't working anymore, the freedom to do that, to do things a different way. All of those quite energising answers that come back have just been a delight to listen to. And they're different each time. Different groups, of course, take it in their own way. So I'm going to answer that almost with that question. Just to be thinking about what else are you gaining if you don't get that kind of one very obvious metric that the system is demanding of you? What else might you be gaining?
And so just to finish for today, we ask all our guests this question, which is if you could share only one piece of career advice with everybody listening today, kind of what would it be? It could be your own advice. It could be something someone else has told you that's really stuck with you. It can be absolutely anything, but just kind of one thing that you'd like to leave us with for today.
So I think the breadth of experiences I've had across sport, diplomacy, business, parenting is because I've always been really curious, and I've followed my curiosity and just to see what might happen. What does it look like through that door that's opening in front of me? So my piece of advice would be to follow where curiosity takes you.
So I hope you enjoyed that extended edition of my interview with Cath. If you'd like to learn more, her website is cathbishop.com. You can find her on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and her book is called The Long Win, which I'd really recommend reading. It's a really great combination of practical tools and techniques similar to Squiggly that you can apply within your business. And Cath has done a lot of work in kind of leadership and in the business context, so she kind of gets that world herself, and some really inspiring stories because she's had such fascinating experiences, you know, rowing in the Olympics and as a diplomat, kind of super squiggly and just really fascinating. So it sort of has that extra aspect of intrigue and interest as well. And it's not a tough tome of a book, you know, it's not going to sit on your bedside table for the year. You'll be able to read it in sections and it's easily digestible, and I'm confident there'll be something you'll be able to do with kind of what you read as well. So hopefully that'll be useful to spend some time with. Do get in touch with me if you've got any questions or comments. I'm just sarah@amazingif.com, or you can always just connect with me on LinkedIn and message me there if that's easier. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye for now.